The ship's alarms blared as Kale fought to maintain control of the rapidly descending transport vessel. Warning lights bathed the cockpit in an ominous red glow as the ship plummeted through Viridia's dense atmosphere, trailing smoke and debris. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered, knuckles white as he gripped the controls. The ship had taken heavy fire from an unknown assailant while approaching the unexplored planet. A routine cargo delivery turned deadly ambush. A violent explosion rocked the vessel, sending Kale slamming against his restraints. The view screen cracked as the forest canopy rushed up to meet him. He braced for impact, a veteran's instinct taking over. This wasn't his first crash landing, but might well be his last. The transport carved a fiery path through the alien forest, shattering trees and scattering wildlife before grinding to a halt in a small clearing. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the distant calls of disturbed creatures. Kale groaned, blood trickling from a gash above his eye. Pain radiated from his ribs, bruised, maybe cracked but not broken. A quick inventory of his injuries confirmed he'd survived worse. Survival was what he did best, after all. It was living afterward that had always proven difficult. He gathered what supplies remained intact: a sidearm with limited charge, a multi-tool, emergency rations, and a personal medkit. His communications equipment lay in ruins, the long-range transmitter shattered beyond repair. No calling for help then. No extraction team. Just him and whatever waited in the untamed wilderness of Iridia. As Kale emerged from the wreckage, the planet's alien beauty struck him immediately. Viridia's forest stretched in all directions, its foliage a peculiar mixture of deep indigos and vibrant teals, with bioluminescent fungi clinging to massive tree trunks. Light filtered strangely through the canopy, casting everything in an ethereal blue-green glow that shifted as the planet's twin suns moved across the sky. He'd studied the preliminary reports on Viridia, a frontier world rich in resources, inhabited only by wildlife as far as initial scans could detect. The perfect target for the mining corporations and military interests he often transported cargo for. The reports hadn't mentioned the strangely geometric stone formations jutting from the forest floor or the crumbling pillars half reclaimed by vegetation. Signs of civilization, ancient and abandoned. So much for uninhabited, Kale muttered, examining a carved symbol on a nearby stone. It resembled a spiral with angular protrusions, weathered by time, but unmistakably artificial. The sound of movement in the underbrush brought his hand to his weapon. The reports had mentioned predators, large ones. The sidearm wouldn't do much against anything substantial, but it was better than nothing. As dusk approached, the forest transformed. Plants that had appeared harmless in daylight began to emit soft pulses of light in blues and purples. Beautiful but disorienting. More concerning were the sounds, guttural growls and high-pitched keening calls that seemed to draw closer with each passing minute. Kale needed shelter. The damaged transport was too exposed, and something had begun circling the crash site, just beyond the clearing's edge. Multiple somethings, judging by the sounds. Things that knew wounded prey when they saw it. He spotted a narrow pathway leading deeper into the forest, toward what appeared to be a cliff face split by a waterfall. Not water, he realized as he drew closer, but a strange, luminescent liquid that cascaded down the rock face like liquid starlight. The cliff might offer caves or overhangs, somewhere defensible for the night. The creatures pursuing him grew bolder as darkness fell completely, their shapes briefly visible at the edge of his field of vision, sleek, low-slung bodies with multiple limbs and elongated heads. Pack hunters, coordinating their approach. Kale picked up his pace. The waterfall roared ahead, more impressive up close. The glowing liquid gave off a faint humming sound and cast enough light to see by. Behind it, as he'd hoped, the cliff face was carved away, revealing a cave entrance. Kale squeezed past the luminescent flow, the liquid leaving a tingling sensation where it touched his skin but causing no apparent harm. The cave extended deeper than expected, its walls inscribed with more of the spiral symbols he'd seen earlier. Not natural formations, then, but constructed, or at least modified by intelligent hands. The air grew warmer as he ventured deeper, drawn by a faint, pulsing glow emanating from a larger chamber ahead. What he found there stopped him cold. A woman, or something very like a woman, lay curled against the far wall, bound by glowing manacles that seemed fused directly to the stone floor. Her skin was pale with faint, luminescent patterns that shifted beneath the surface like gentle currents. Her features were sharp but unmistakably humanoid, save for her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and the color of burnished amber with vertical pupils that dilated as they fixed on Kale. Her body tensed, assuming a defensive posture despite her restraints. She was injured. A dark fluid that might have been blood stained her side, and bruises marked her exposed skin. The tattered remains of what might once have been clothing clung to her lithe frame. "Hello," Kale said softly, lowering his weapon and raising his empty palm in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "I'm not going to hurt you." The woman's lips pulled back, revealing teeth slightly sharper than human norm. "Touch me again, human," she hissed, her voice resonant with an undertone that made the cave air vibrate. "I'll show you a monster you won't survive." Her eyes flashed briefly with the same energy that flowed through the waterfall outside, a power barely contained. In that moment, Kale realized he'd found something far more significant than shelter for the night, and far more dangerous. Kale remained perfectly still, assessing the situation. The woman, if that's what she was, clearly considered him a threat. Her words suggested someone else had harmed her before his arrival. More importantly, the technology binding her was far beyond anything his employers had access to, which meant someone else was operating on Viridia. Someone with advanced capabilities and apparently hostile intent toward this creature. "I haven't touched you," he said calmly, settling into a crouch a respectful distance away. "My ship crashed. I'm just looking for shelter." The woman's glare remained suspicious, but some of the immediate hostility faded. Her amber eyes darted to the cave entrance, then back to him. "They'll come at nightfall," she said, her voice softer but no less intense. "The ones who put these chains on me. If they find you here, they'll kill you. Or worse." Kale studied the restraints binding her to the cave floor. They resembled metallic bands but glowed with an internal light that pulsed in rhythm with faint symbols etched into their surface, similar to the spirals outside, but more complex. Where they touched her wrists and ankles, her luminescent skin patterns darkened, as if the devices were suppressing something within her. "Who are they?" he asked. "The silencers," she replied, the words emerging as almost a growl. "They help my kind. Capture us. Study us. Drain us." Kale's military experience had taught him to recognize the tone of someone who had suffered at an enemy's hands. Whatever these silencers were, they'd given this woman, this being, reason to fear and hate them. And now he was trapped in a cave that would soon be visited by an advanced hostile force, with a potentially dangerous alien who clearly didn't trust him. Standard operating procedure would be to retreat, find another shelter, avoid involvement. But something about the woman's situation stirred something long dormant in Kale. A sense of injustice, perhaps. Or maybe just the recognition of another survivor. "These chains," he said, gesturing toward her restraints. "If I help remove them, will you show me how to avoid these silencers?" Suspicion flashed across her features again. "Why would you help me, human?" "Name's Kale," he replied, ignoring her question. "You got a name?" She hesitated, studying him with those disconcerting amber eyes. "Lyra," she finally said, the name rolling off her tongue like something rarely used. "Well, Lyra," Kale said, moving slowly toward her restraints, "I've got my own reasons to avoid whoever's hunting you. And two have better chances than one on a planet like this." He approached cautiously, aware of how she tensed as he drew near. The restraints had no visible locks or seams, but the multi-tool in his pack might be able to disrupt whatever energy source powered them. As he knelt beside her, he noticed more details, The patterns on her skin weren't tattoos or markings, but seemed to flow beneath the surface like luminous veins, dimming where the restraints touched her. "I'm going to try something," he warned, powering up his multi-tool. "Might not work, but it's worth a shot." Lyra watched him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope as he brought the tool close to her restraints. The moment it touched the glowing metal, a surge of energy knocked Kale backward, sending him sprawling across the cave floor. Lyra's bitter laugh held no humor. "They're not simple locks, human. The chains are bound to my energy. Only those who place them have the key." Kale sat up, shaking off the effects of the shock. "Then we need to find these silencers and take their key." "You don't understand," Lyra said, frustration evident in her voice. "They're hunters, killers. They have technology your kind can't comprehend. They'll be back soon to move me to their main facility. You should run while you can." Before Kale could respond, a distant sound echoed. Through the cave, mechanical and rhythmic, like the hum of advanced engines. "They're coming," Lyra whispered, genuine fear crossing her features for the first time. "Hide or leave. Now." Kale made a split-second decision. He ducked behind a large formation of crystals near the cave wall, his hand on his sidearm. From this vantage point, he could observe without being immediately seen. The cave entrance filled with harsh, artificial light as three figures entered. They moved with mechanical precision, encased in sleek armor that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the cave's ambient glow. Their helmets obscured any faces, but their proportions seemed humanoid enough. One approached Lyra, scanning her with a device that projected holographic data into the air. "Subject's energy levels optimal for transport," it announced, the voice distorted and emotionless. "Preparing for extraction." Another figure produced a small, crystalline object that pulsed with the same energy as Lyra's restraints. "Relocation protocol initiated. Facility awaits specimen delivery." Lyra's defiance had vanished, replaced by a stillness that spoke of profound dread. As the figure brought the crystal near her restraints, Kale made his choice. He emerged from hiding, weapon raised. "Step away from her," he commanded, aiming at the figure with the crystal. The silencers turned in perfect unison, their movements unnaturally fluid. "Human presence detected. Unregistered. Unauthorized. Protocol. Eliminate contamination." Kale fired as the nearest silencer raised what could only be a weapon. His shot struck the figure's armor, dissipating across its surface without apparent effect. In return, a blast of energy shot past his head, superheating the air and leaving the scent of ozone. Outnumbered and outgunned, Kale dove for cover as the silencers advanced. His military training kicked in, assess threats, identify weaknesses, create an advantage. The helmets, perhaps the eye slits, were vulnerable. He took aim and fired a precise shot at the lead silencer's faceplate. The creature staggered as the blast connected, its helmet's surface fracturing slightly. Encouraged, Kale targeted the same spot again. The second shot broke through, revealing glimpses of what lay beneath. Not flesh, but a mass of writhing, fiber-optic tendrils surrounding a central core that glowed the same color as Lyra's restraints. Not human, then. Not entirely mechanical either. Something else. While the damaged silencer recovered, Kale charged toward the one holding the crystal key, ramming into it with his full weight. The collision sent them both crashing to the ground, the key skittering across the cave floor. "The key!" he shouted to Lyra as he grappled with the silencer, its inhuman strength nearly overwhelming him. "Use it!" Lyra stretched as far as her restraints allowed, fingers straining toward the fallen crystal. The third silencer moved to intercept, but Kale managed to trip it with an extended leg, buying precious seconds. With a final desperate effort, Lyra's fingers closed around the crystal. The moment she touched it, her skin's luminescent patterns flared brilliantly. She pressed the crystal against her restraints, which responded by pulsing rapidly before shattering into fragments that dissipated like smoke. Free from her bonds, Lyra rose to her feet, her movements graceful despite her injuries. The patterns beneath her skin brightened until they outshone the cave's ambient light, flowing like quicksilver across her body. Her amber eyes blazed with the same energy. "I warned you," she said, but now she addressed the silencers rather than Kale. Her voice reverberated with power that made the cave walls vibrate sympathetically. "I told you I'd show you a monster." She extended her hands toward the nearest silencer, and streams of energy, similar to the waterfall outside, but intensely focused, poured from her palms. The silencer's armor melted on contact, the entity within writhing as its systems failed catastrophically. The remaining silencers retreated toward the cave entrance, but Lyra pursued, moving with predatory grace. One fired at her, but she deflected the energy blast with a gesture, redirecting it into the cave's ceiling. Rocks crashed down, narrowly missing Kale as he scrambled for safer ground. In moments, it was over. The silencers lay motionless, their armor smoking and broken to reveal the alien technology beneath. Lyra stood amidst the destruction, her brilliant glow slowly fading as she lowered her arms. She turned to Kale, wariness returning to her expression. "Now you've seen," she said quietly, "what I am, what I can do." Kale regarded her with a new understanding. Not just a prisoner, a weapon, something powerful enough that these advanced beings wanted to capture rather than kill her. "Looks like we both have stories to tell," he replied, holstering his sidearm as a gesture of trust. "And we should probably tell them somewhere. Else, they'll send more when these don't report back." Lyra nodded, her expression unreadable as she stepped over the fallen silencers toward the cave entrance. "There are safe places deeper in the forest, if you still want to come with me." It wasn't a question, exactly, but Kale answered anyway. "I'm not seeing a lot of better options at the moment." As they emerged from behind the luminescent waterfall, Viridia's night had fully descended. The forest glowed with bioluminescence, beautiful and alien. Lyra paused, lifting her face to the starlight as if savoring her freedom. "Thank you," she said without looking at him, the words coming with obvious difficulty. "For helping me." Kale simply nodded, sensing that further acknowledgement would only embarrass them both. Instead, he asked which way. Lyra pointed toward a distant ridge where the forest grew denser. "There, but the path won't be easy." "Never is," Kale replied, checking his supplies. "Lead on." As they moved deeper into Viridia's wilderness, Kale knew he'd crossed a line from which there was no return. Whatever mission had brought him to this planet was now secondary to survival, and to understanding the secrets of both Viridia and the enigmatic woman who walked just ahead of him, her skin still faintly glowing in the darkness. The forest at night proved even more beautiful and treacherous than Kale had anticipated. Plants reacted to their passage, some retracting like sensitive mimosa, others unfurling to release spores that drifted in luminous clouds. Lyra navigated with confidence, occasionally warning him away from innocuous-looking flora with a sharp gesture or his caution. "Death blossom," she explained when he nearly brushed against a delicate blue flower. "The nectar paralyzes. The root tendrils do the rest." Communication remained challenging. Lyra understood his language, but often searched for words, suggesting she'd learned it secondhand or through observation. Her own native tongue emerged occasionally in frustrated mutters, musical and complex, with sounds Kale's human vocal apparatus couldn't hope to reproduce. "How do you know my language?" he finally asked as they paused beside a stream of the same glowing liquid that had formed the waterfall. Lyra knelt and drank directly from it, the fluid briefly illuminating her throat from within as she swallowed. "The silencers collected many humans before," she replied after wiping her mouth. "I listened, learned. Your kind isn't difficult to understand." There was judgment in her tone, though whether directed at human simplicity or their complicity with the silencers remained unclear. "And you?" Kale asked, cautiously sampling the luminescent liquid himself. It tasted like mineral water with an electric undertone, leaving his lips tingling. "What are you exactly?" Lyra's amber eyes narrowed. "My people were here long before yours discovered this world." "We are." She struggled for the word, Keepers. Guardians of Iridia. Guardians against what? She gestured vaguely upward. Those who would take, consume, destroy. Her gaze fixed meaningfully on him, like humans often do. Kale couldn't argue the point. Humanity's expansion across discovered worlds rarely prioritized preservation. And these silencers? They're not human. They were once, Lyra said, resuming their journey along a barely perceptible path. Now there's something else. Changed by the masters they serve to better hunt my kind. What masters? The collectors. They lead, the silencers obey. She pushed aside a curtain of hanging vines. The collectors want what flows through Viridia's veins, what flows through mine. The energy, Kale surmised, remembering how she had manipulated it during their escape. The same stuff as this water? Essence, she corrected. Life force. Power. Your words are inadequate. They traveled in silence after that, Kale processing what he'd learned while remaining alert for threats. His military career had taken him to dozens of worlds, but never had he encountered anything like Viridia or its guardian. If what Lyra said was true, the routine cargo run that had brought him here was likely a cover for early resource exploitation, perhaps even connected to these collectors she feared. The thought troubled him more than it should have. After the betrayal that had ended his formal military career, Kale had adopted a policy of asking few questions about his contracts. Transport the cargo, collect the payment, move on. No attachments, no cause, no crusade. It had kept him alive and solvent for years. Yet here he was, helping an alien fugitive evade capture by forces he didn't understand, on a planet he'd never heard of until a week ago. Old habits die hard, he supposed, even ones you thought you'd killed yourself. As dawn approached, the forest's bioluminescence gradually dimmed, replaced by natural light filtering through the canopy. Lyra led them to what appeared to be a massive fallen tree, its trunk wider than Kale was tall. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was hollow, with an opening just large enough to crawl through. "We'll rest here," she announced, slipping inside. The silencers avoid daylight when possible. Their systems overheat. The interior was surprisingly spacious and dry, lined with a soft, moss-like growth that gave slightly under Kale's weight as he settled against the curved wall. Only now, in relative safety, did he become fully aware of his own exhaustion and injuries. His ribs throbbed, and dried blood still caked the side of his face from the crash. Lyra noticed his discomfort. "You're damaged," she observed, the clinical term somehow more alienating than her earlier hostility. "I've had worse," Kale replied automatically, the veteran's dismissal of pain. To his surprise, Lyra moved closer, kneeling beside him. "Hold still," she commanded, raising her hands toward his injured side. Instinctively, Kale tensed. The memory of what those same hands had done to the silencers remained fresh. "I won't hurt you," Lyra said, a hint of something like humor in her voice. "Not after you help me escape. That would be inefficient." Before Kale could respond, her palms began to emit a soft glow, gentler than the destructive energy she'd wielded in combat, but clearly related. As she brought her hands near his ribcage, warmth spread through his side, easing the sharp pain to a dull ache. "This is what your kind seeks," she explained as she worked. "The power to heal, to create, but they only want to weaponize it, to control it, to drain it from Viridia until nothing remains." The energy seeped into Kale's skin, accelerating his body's natural healing. He could almost feel the damaged tissues knitting together, the inflammation subsiding. "Why help me?" he asked, echoing her earlier question. Lyra's amber eyes met his. "The same reason you helped me, perhaps. Survival requires allies." She withdrew her hands, the glow fading. "Rest now. I'll watch." Despite his ingrained caution around unknown entities, Kale found himself drifting into sleep, lulled by the relative safety and the lingering warmth of Lyra's healing touch. His last conscious thought was that he'd just allowed an alien capable of melting advanced armor to use unknown energy directly on his body, a level of trust he hadn't extended to anyone in years. He woke hours later to Lyra's hand over his mouth and her urgent whisper in his ear. Something comes. Not silencers. Different. Kale was instantly alert, reaching for his sidearm. Lyra removed her hand and pointed toward the hollow log's entrance. Muted growls and the sound of sniffing reached them. Predators investigating their scent trail. Shadows talkers, Lyra whispered. Hunt by smell and body heat. Very persistent. Dangerous. Kale kept his voice low, already knowing the answer. Very. Pack hunters. Smart. Hungry. A dark shape appeared at the log's entrance. A sleek, six-limbed creature with an elongated head that split into mandible-like appendages. Its skin was matte black, absorbing rather than reflecting light, making its exact features difficult to discern. It sniffed the air, then emitted a low, clicking call that was answered by similar sounds from elsewhere in the forest. Kale raised his weapon, but Lyra placed a restraining hand on his arm. Too many, she cautioned, and the sound will bring more. What's the plan, then? He asked, watching as a second creature joined the first, both too large to fit through the narrow entrance, but clearly intent on their prey. Lyra pressed her hand against the interior wall of their shelter. Immediately, the moss-like substance began to glow with the same energy that flowed through her, growing brighter until the shadows talkers retreated with high-pitched keens of discomfort. Light hurts their eyes, she explained, maintaining the glow. But they won't go far. They'll wait for us to emerge. So we're trapped, Kale concluded, settling back against the wall. With immediate danger averted, his thoughts turned tactical. We need to know more about each other if we're going to survive this. You've been honest so far, I think, but there's more to your story. Lyra regarded him with those unsettling amber eyes, considering. Finally, she nodded. The same is true for you, human. You're not a simple cargo pilot. Former military, Kale admitted. Special operations for the United Coalition. Now I'm freelance. A mercenary, Lyra translated, her tone neutral. Independent contractor, he corrected with a wry smile. Sounds better on tax forms. Lyra didn't return the smile, but some of the tension left her shoulders. My people are called the Viridian. This world is named for us, or we for it. The distinction doesn't exist in our language. We are part of Viridia, connected to its essence. Those patterns on your skin, Kale observed. They're channels for the energy? The essence. Yes. We channel, store, and direct it. For healing, for growth, for protection. Her expression darkened. The collectors discovered us decades ago in your time measurement. They realized what we could do, what the essence could do if harnessed. They came with machines and weapons, capturing those they could, killing those who resisted. And the silencers? Their creation. Humans altered with technology and essence itself, programmed to hunt us efficiently. Her voice grew bitter. They cannot use the essence as we do, but they can detect it, track it, contain it. How many of your people remain free? Kale asked, beginning to understand the scope of what he'd stumbled into. Few, Lyra admitted. Perhaps 50, hidden deep in Viridia's most sacred places. I was a scout, monitoring the collector's movements when I was captured. She fell silent, staring at the glowing moss as if lost in memory. Kale didn't press for details of her captivity. He'd seen enough prisoners of war to recognize the haunted look in her eyes. And you, she finally asked, why does a human mercenary help a Viridian against his own kind? The silencers aren't my kind, Kale replied firmly. And I've spent enough time following orders without questioning. Seen enough worlds stripped bare by corporations with military backing. He shrugged. Maybe I'm developing a conscience in my old age. Lyra studied him, clearly searching for deception. There's more, she stated rather than asked. Kale sighed. Some truths were difficult to articulate, especially to a stranger, even one who'd save his life. My last official mission was on a world called Acaris. Beautiful place, peaceful indigenous population. We were told we were there as peacekeepers to protect the locals from insurgents. He paused, the familiar weight of the memory settling over him. Turned out, the insurgents were just locals protecting their sacred lands from mining operations. The corporation had paid off our commanders to eliminate the resistance, disguised as a security operation. And you followed orders, Lyra surmised. Until I didn't, Kale replied quietly. By then, it was too late for many of the locals. Too late for most of my team once I turned on our commanders. I'm the only one who made it off-world alive. Understanding dawned in Lyra's eyes. You're a fugitive too, officially listed as killed in action. Unofficially, there are people who know I'm alive. People who'd prefer I wasn't. Outside, the Shadows Talkers continued to prowl, occasionally testing the entrance but retreating from the light. The standoff couldn't last indefinitely. Eventually, they would need to move on. We need to reach the Haven, Lyra said, changing the subject. A sacred place where my remaining people gather. It's protected by ancient defenses that keep the Silencers at bay. They can help us, and with your knowledge of the Collector's operations, we might finally find a way to drive them from our world. How far? 2 days' journey, through the most dangerous parts of the forest. The path I planned is no longer safe. The Silencers will be monitoring it after our escape. Kale considered their options. What about my crash site? My ship had emergency beacons. If they're still functioning, I could signal for extraction. Lyra's expression hardened. And bring more humans to Viridia? More exploitation? Or reinforcements, Kale countered. Not everyone works for these collectors. The evidence of what they're doing here, what they've done to your people, would concern many in the coalition. Words Lyra dismissed. Promises. While my people die and our world is drained. Before Kale could respond, a new sound cut through the Shadowstalker's growls, a high-pitched mechanical whine. The predators scattered, their clickings turning to sounds of alarm. Silencer scout drones, Lyra whispered urgently. They're tracking us. The momentary philosophical debate forgotten, they both moved toward the log's entrance, peering out cautiously. In the distance, small metallic spheres darted between trees, scanning methodically. They moved in a pattern, closing in on their location. They'll find us soon, Lyra said grimly. We need to move. Now, the Shadows Talkers are the lesser threat. Choose, human, the hunt or the hunted. With that, Lyra slipped out of their shelter, her movements fluid and silent despite her injuries. After a moment's hesitation, Kale followed, weapon ready as they plunged once more into Viridia's dangerous embrace. They ran through the forest, Lyra setting a punishing pace that Kale struggled to match despite his military conditioning. The Viridian moved with perfect adaptation to her environment, anticipating obstacles, knowing precisely which vines would support her weight as she swung across gaps and which seemingly solid ground would give way to hidden sinkholes. The Silencer drones pursued relentlessly, their mechanical whine growing closer whenever Kale and Lyra paused to catch their breath. Worse, the commotion had attracted more Shadows Talkers, their sleek forms occasionally visible stalking parallel to their course, waiting for an opportunity. We can't outrun them forever, Kale called to Lyra as they splashed across a shallow stream of normal water, hoping to mask their scent from the predators. We don't need forever, she replied without slowing. Just until nightfall. The forest grew denser as they ran, the trees closer together, the undergrowth more tangled. Massive root systems created natural barricades that they were forced to climb over or squeeze through, slowing their progress. The twin suns of Viridia tracked across the sky, their light diffused through the canopy, creating shifting patterns that disoriented Kale. As they crested a particularly large root system, the ground suddenly dropped away before them, revealing a vast sinkhole easily 100 meters across. Ancient tree roots formed a lattice around its perimeter, while far below, a pool of the luminescent essence gathered, its glow visible even in daylight. We have to go around, Kale said, already searching for an alternate path. Lyra shook her head. No time. We cross. She pointed to the massive roots spanning the chasm. Follow exactly where I step. Before Kale could protest, she stepped onto the nearest root, testing its strength before proceeding with the confidence of someone who'd made similar crossings before. The route was wide enough to walk on, but offered no handholds. A single slip would mean a fatal fall. The drone's whine grew louder behind them. With a muttered curse, Kale followed Lyra onto the natural bridge, focusing on each careful step. The roots swayed slightly under their combined weight, but held firm. Halfway across, disaster struck. A drone burst from the canopy directly ahead of them, its scanning beam sweeping over Lyra. An alarm tone emitted from the device as it registered her Viridian energy signature. "Down!" Kale shouted, drawing his sidearm. Lyra dropped flat against the root as Kale fired at the drone. His first shot missed, but the second connected, sending the damaged device spiraling into the depths of the sinkhole. The victory was short-lived, however, as more drones converged on their position, alerted by the first alarm. "Move!" Kale urged, pulling Lyra to her feet. They abandoned caution for speed, racing across the remaining length of the root bridge as drones closed in from all directions. Lyra reached the far side first, turning to extend her hand to Kale as he made the final leap. Their fingers had just connected when a drone slammed into Kale's back, the impact nearly sending him into the abyss. He clung to the edge, Lyra's grip on his wrist the only thing preventing his fall as the drone hovered nearby, preparing for another assault. With her free hand, Lyra made a slashing gesture toward the drone. An arc of energy lashed out from her fingertips, cutting through the machine as if it were made of paper. It fell in two perfect halves, tumbling into the sinkhole. "Climb!" she ordered, straining to maintain her hold on Kale. Using her strength as leverage, Kale managed to pull himself up and over the edge, collapsing beside her on solid ground as more drones converged on their position. "We can't outrun them," Kale gasped, checking his weapon's charge. It was dangerously low after the encounter with the silencers and the drones. Lyra scanned their surroundings, amber eyes calculating. "We don't need to outrun them," she said, grabbing his arm. "We need to hide from them." She pulled him toward a dense cluster of plants with broad, fleshy leaves that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Without hesitation, Lyra parted the foliage and revealed a small opening in the ground beneath. "A burrow?" Kale asked doubtfully. "A passage," Lyra corrected. "The root systems of Viridia connect. The silencers cannot track us through the densest parts. Too much essence interference." With the drones closing in, Kale had little choice but to follow as Lyra slipped into the opening. The passage was narrow, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees through a tunnel formed by interwoven roots and compacted soil. Bioluminescent fungi provided just enough light to navigate by, casting everything in a soft blue glow. "The plants themselves are alive with essence," Lyra explained as they crawled deeper. "It masks our energy signatures, mine especially. The drones will lose us." The tunnel eventually widened into a small chamber where multiple root passages converged. Here, crystal formations jutted from the walls, each containing what appeared to be tiny galaxies of light swirling within. The air was thick with moisture and the subtle electric tang of the essence. "We can rest here," Lyra said, sitting back against one of the larger crystals. "Even if they detect us, the drones are too large to follow through the passages." Kale sat opposite her, taking the opportunity to check his injuries and remaining supplies. The healing Lyra had performed earlier had substantially reduced the pain in his ribs, but his energy reserves were dangerously low. He retrieved one of his dwindling emergency rations, a compact, nutrient-dense bar designed for extended field operations. Breaking it in half, he offered a portion to Lyra. "Not sure if it's compatible with your biology, but it's better than nothing." Lyra accepted the offering cautiously, sniffing it before taking a small bite. Her expression remained neutral as she chewed and swallowed. "Strange texture, but the energy content is acceptable." They ate in silence for a while, the quiet broken only by the distant, muffled sounds of drones searching above. "The essence," Kale finally said, gesturing to the crystals surrounding them. "You said the collectors want to harvest it. Why? What can it do besides what I've seen?" Lyra's expression grew solemn. "Everything you've seen, the healing, the energy manipulation, that's merely the surface. The essence is life itself on Viridia. It flows through all things, connects all things. She placed her hand on the nearest crystal, causing the light within to react to her touch, swirling toward her fingers. In its purest form, it can reshape reality. Create, destroy, transform, and your people can control it, Kale observed. Not control, Lyra corrected sharply. Channel, guide. We are conduits, not masters. The essence chooses as much as it is chosen. She withdrew her hand from the crystal. The collectors don't understand this. They seek to extract, refine, weaponize. They've already taken enough to create the silencers. Corrupted humans fused with technology and infused with processed essence. And this is what they want you for? To help them process more. Lyra's gaze dropped. My lineage, we have a stronger connection than most. The patterns you see on my skin mark me as a high channeler. The collectors believe they can use me to access greater reserves of essence than they could reach on their own. The monster you mentioned, Kale said carefully. When we first met, is that what happens when you channel too much? A shadow passed over Lyra's face. What happens when I lose control, yes? The essence flowing through a viridian must be balanced, directed with precision. When emotions overwhelm, fear, rage, pain, the essence responds accordingly. It can consume the channeler from within, transform them into something else. Has that happened to you before? Once, she admitted, her voice barely audible. When my family unit was first captured, I was young, untrained. My rage triggered a transformation. I destroyed many silencers, but also, she trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Your family, Kale finished gently. Lyra nodded, the luminescent patterns beneath her skin dimming with her sorrow. The essence responds to emotion. The stronger the emotion, the more powerful and unpredictable the response. That's why the silencers use those restraints. They dampen both our connection to the essence and our emotional responses. Understanding dawned on Kale. That's why you were so hostile when I found you. You were afraid of losing control again. I still am, Lyra admitted. Every moment, every day since they took me. The vulnerability in her admission struck Kale deeply. Despite their differences, he recognized the burden she carried, the fear of oneself that came from possessing destructive capability. He'd seen it in fellow soldiers after particularly brutal campaigns, the way they flinched at loud noises or isolated themselves for fear of how they might react. We all have monsters inside us, he said quietly. The difference is in how we choose to face them. Lyra studied him with those amber eyes, seeing past his gruff exterior to the core of shared understanding. For the first time, a faint smile curved her lips. Perhaps humans and Viridians aren't so different after all. The moment of connection was interrupted by a distant rumble that shook dust from the chamber ceiling. Lyra tensed, her gaze darting upward. That wasn't a drone, Kale said, reaching for his weapon. No, Lyra agreed, the patterns on her skin brightening with alarm. Something bigger. We need to move. They scrambled back into the root tunnels, Lyra leading the way through the labyrinthine network with unerring confidence. The rumbling continued intermittently, growing louder as they progressed. Eventually, they emerged from a different opening onto a ridge overlooking a vast clearing in the forest. What they saw below stopped them both cold. A massive vessel hovered above the trees, sleek, angular, and utterly alien in design. Beneath it, the forest was being systematically destroyed. Mechanical harvesters stripped away vegetation while drilling apparatuses bored deep into Viridia's soil. Where they penetrated, luminescent essence was pumped upward through transparent tubes into the waiting ship. Hundreds of silencers coordinated the operation, their movements synchronized as they directed larger, more heavily armored variants in the collection process. In the center of the clearing stood a structure that could only be a temporary base of operations, a prefabricated facility surrounded by energy barriers. The extraction has already begun, Lyra whispered, horror evident in her voice. They're draining one of the sacred nodes, a nexus point where essence gathers naturally. Kale studied the operation with a tactician's eye. That's a full-scale harvesting operation. Military-grade equipment. Whatever these collectors are, they have serious backing. This is why we must reach the haven, Lyra insisted. My people need to know the collectors have escalated their efforts. If they drain too many nodes, the damage to Viridia will be irreversible. As they watched, a new development unfolded below. A smaller vessel descended from the main ship, landing near the central facility. A procession of silencers formed an honor guard as a ramp extended from the craft. "What's happening?" Kale asked, straining to see details from their elevated position. Lyra's expression darkened. "The overseer," she hissed. "Malachur comes to supervise personally." A figure emerged from the vessel, taller than the silencers and moving with fluid grace despite an apparently human form. Unlike the armored silencers, this being wore flowing robes that seemed to absorb light. Where its face should have been, only a smooth, reflective surface caught and distorted the surrounding light. "That's their leader?" Kale asked, disturbed by the entity's unnatural appearance. "One of them," Lyra replied. "Malachur oversees Viridia operations. He was once human, I believe, before becoming something more and less. The collectors reward their most loyal servants with physical transformation. Essence-infused evolution, they call it." Kale watched as Malachur moved through the facility, the silencers bowing in his presence. "He's inspecting the operation. This could be good for us." Lyra turned to him, confusion evident in her expression. "How is this good?" "Leaders conduct inspections when they're worried about progress or security," Kale explained, his military experience providing insight. "If Malachur is here personally, it means our escape has them concerned. They're vulnerable, or they're accelerating their plans because of us," Lyra countered. "Either way, we need to reach the haven before they expand the operation further." Kale continued studying the facility, committing details to memory, guard patterns, equipment deployments, potential weaknesses. "How far to this haven of yours?" "We can reach it by nightfall if we hurry," Lyra replied. "But we must circle wide around this extraction site. The silencers will have the area heavily patrolled." As they prepared to retreat from their observation point, movement at the edge of the clearing caught Kale's attention. A group of silencers emerged from the forest, escorting captives, Viridians like Lyra, though their skin patterns were less pronounced. They wore the same restraints that had bound Lyra in the cave, their expressions vacant as they were led toward the central facility. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "More of my people," she whispered, anguish clear in her voice. "They're gathering channelers for something big." Kale recognized the look in her eyes, the desperate calculation of someone preparing to attempt a rescue against impossible odds. "We can't help them now," he said gently but firmly. "Not alone. We need to reach your people, form a plan." For a moment, he thought she might argue, might plunge headlong into a suicidal rescue attempt. Instead, her shoulders slumped slightly, reason overcoming emotion. "You're right," she admitted. "But we will return for them." "We will," Kale promised, surprised by his own conviction. This wasn't his fight, yet somehow in the span of a day, it had become so. They retreated from the ridge, moving with extra caution now that they knew the scope of the silencer's operation. The forest seemed to sense the violation occurring at the extraction site. Plants withdrew as they passed, luminescence dimmed, and the usual ambient sounds of wildlife fell silent. Viridia itself appeared to be recoiling from the wound being inflicted upon it. As they traveled, Kale noticed that Lyra occasionally placed her hand against tree trunks or stone formations, closing her eyes briefly as if in communication. We finally asked about this behavior. Her response was grim. "I'm leaving markers," she explained. "Energy signatures that other Viridians can sense. Warnings about what we've seen. Can the silencers detect them too?" "Perhaps," she admitted. "But the risk is necessary. My people must be prepared." The terrain grew more challenging as they continued their journey, the forest giving way to rocky outcroppings and steep inclines. Signs of Viridia's ancient civilization became more prevalent. Weathered statues half reclaimed by vegetation, crumbling terraces cut into hillsides, and intricate symbols carved into standing stones. "Were these built by your people?" Kale asked as they passed a particularly elaborate structure that resembled a temple or observatory. "By our ancestors," Lyra clarified. "Before the Great Sleep." Great Sleep. She paused, considering how to explain. Long ago, Viridia faced a different threat, a natural cataclysm that threatened all life. To survive, most of my ancestors entered a state of suspended animation, merging their consciousness with the essence itself. They sleep still, their bodies transformed to pure energy, waiting for the time to reawaken. And your people now, descendants of those few who remained awake as guardians. Lyra's expression grew distant. "We maintain the old ways, protect the sleeping ones. At least, we did until the collectors came." The twin suns began their descent toward the horizon as they finally crested a rise, overlooking a valley unlike any they'd encountered so far. Here, the forest was different, older, more deliberate in its growth patterns. Trees formed perfect concentric circles around a central clearing, their trunks inscribed with the same spiral symbols Kale had seen throughout their journey. The ground was carpeted with phosphorescent moss that responded to their footsteps, creating ripples of light that spread outward. "The haven," Lyra announced, relief evident in her voice. "We've made it." As they descended into the valley, Kale felt a strange sensation, as if they were passing through an invisible barrier. The air grew warmer, filled with a subtle humming he felt rather than heard. His skin tingled, and for a brief moment, he thought he glimpsed patterns beneath his own skin, similar to Lyra's but fainter, like a reflection on water. "What was that?" he asked, examining his now normal arm. "The haven's protection," Lyra explained. "A barrier of pure essence that recognizes friend from foe. It allowed you passage because you're with me." They continued toward the center of the valley, where the trees grew so close together their trunks seemed to merge into living walls. As they approached, sections of this natural barrier parted, revealing a concealed community within. Structures blended seamlessly with living trees, forming dwellings that seemed to grow rather than being built. Viridians moved among them, men, women, and children with varying patterns of luminescence beneath their skin, all stopping to stare as Lyra entered with a human at her side. An older Viridian with elaborate, brightly glowing patterns approached them. His amber eyes, several shades darker than Lyra's, narrowed as he assessed Kale. "Lyra," he greeted, his voice resonating with the same undertone that characterized her speech. "We feared you lost to the silencers." His gaze shifted to Kale. "You bring a human into our sanctuary?" "This is Kale," Lyra introduced. "He helped me escape. The collectors had me bound, Elder Soren. He intervened when he had no reason to." The elder, Soren, continued his assessment of Kale. "And what do you seek here, human? What payment do you expect for your assistance?" Kale met the elder's gaze directly. "I expect nothing, but I've seen what these collectors are doing to your world. I've seen their operation. If there's a way I can help stop them, I will." Soren's expression revealed nothing, but the patterns beneath his skin pulsed thoughtfully. "Curious words from a member of the species that threatens our existence." "Not all humans serve the collectors," Kale replied. "Many would oppose what they're doing if they knew. Yet here you are on Viridia, brought by a ship that carried supplies for our enemies," Soren countered. Kale couldn't deny it. "I didn't know what cargo I was transporting." "That's no excuse, but it's the truth." Lyra stepped forward. "Elder, we don't have time for this. The collectors have established a major extraction operation at the western node. Malachar himself oversees it. They've captured more channelers. I saw them being brought in." This news caused a stir among the gathered Viridians. Soren's patterns flared brightly with alarm. "Malachar comes himself? Then our fears are realized. They prepare for the Great Extraction." "What's the Great Extraction?" Kale asked. Soren regarded him gravely. "The collectors seek to tap into Viridia's central essence reservoir, the heart of our world where the ancient ones sleep. They believe that with enough channelers under their control, they can force access to power beyond imagining. And if they succeed," Kale pressed, "Viridia dies, Lyra, answered simply, "And everything on it." Another elder stepped forward, a female viridian with silver-tinged patterns. "We've felt the disturbances in the essence flow, Soren. The western node's drain has already affected the balance. If they establish more extraction points, we may not have the strength to stop them." "Then we must act now," Lyra insisted, "while Malachor is present and before they can capture more of our people." Soren raised a hand for silence. "You speak of confronting the collectors directly? With what force, Lyra?" "We number fewer than 50 adults capable of channeling battle energies. The silencers have hundreds, with technology specifically designed to counter our abilities." "We have surprise," Kale interjected, drawing all eyes to him. "And we have knowledge of their operation. I've studied their deployment, their security patterns. With the right plan, a small force can do significant damage." Soren's expression remained skeptical. "You propose to help us attack your fellow humans?" "I propose to help you defend your world," Kale corrected. "And the silencers stopped being human a long time ago, from what I've seen." Lyra placed a hand on Kale's arm, her touch conveying support for his words. "Elder, please, listen to what he suggests. We have no other options." After a long moment of consideration, Soren nodded. "Speak your plan, human. But know that if you betray us, no corner of Viridia will hide you from our vengeance." As night fell over the haven, the Viridians gathered to hear Kale's strategy. Despite their initial distrust, they recognized the value of his military expertise. Together with Lyra and the elders, he outlined a daring plan to strike at the heart of the Collector's operation. "The extraction equipment is their vulnerability," Kale explained, using luminescent moss to sketch a map of the facility on the ground. "It requires precise calibration to handle the essence safely. Disrupt that calibration, and the whole system becomes unstable." "How do we approach without detection?" one of the younger Viridians asked. "The silencers will sense our energy signatures." "Not if we move during the peak energy hours," Lyra answered. "When Viridia's twin suns align at midnight, the ambient essence levels spike. The silencer's detection systems will be overwhelmed by background noise." Soren nodded thoughtfully. "A sound strategy. But reaching the extraction equipment will still require passing through heavy security." "That's where I come in," Kale said. "I'll create a diversion at the perimeter, draw their forces away from the central facility. Meanwhile, a small team led by Lyra can target the main extraction apparatus." The planning continued late into the night, each detail scrutinized, each contingency addressed. The more they spoke, the more Kale realized he had fully committed himself to this cause. These weren't just aliens he was helping. There were people fighting for their home against an enemy that saw them as resources to be harvested rather than beings with rights and dignity. It reminded him too much of Acarus, of the mistakes he'd failed to prevent there. Perhaps this was his chance at redemption, or at least atonement. As the council concluded, Lyra guided Kale to a small dwelling where he could rest before the mission. The structure was a marvel of biological engineering, a living space formed from carefully grown trees and illuminated by essence-infused crystals. "Your expertise has given my people hope," Lyra said as they stood at the entrance. "That is a rare gift in these times." "It's a solid plan," Kale replied with forced confidence. "But plans rarely survive first contact with the enemy. We'll need to be adaptable." Lyra nodded, then hesitated, something clearly on her mind. "Kale, if we succeed tomorrow, what then? For you?" The question caught him off guard. He hadn't thought beyond the immediate crisis. "I don't know. My ship is destroyed. There might be an emergency beacon still functioning, but activating it might bring more humans to Viridia," Lyra finished for him. "Yes," he admitted. "I won't do that without your people's consent." Lyra's patterns shifted subtly, reflecting some inner emotion he couldn't interpret. "And if there were no beacon? If there were no way off Viridia?" Kale considered the question seriously. A month ago, the thought of being stranded on an alien world would have filled him with dread. Now, looking at Lyra and the peaceful community around them, he wasn't so sure. "There are worse places to be stranded," he said finally. "Worse people to be stranded with." A smile, genuine and warm, spread across Lyra's face, her amber eyes brightening. Rest well, Kale. Tomorrow, we face the monster together. As she departed, Kale settled into the offered dwelling, his mind racing with thoughts of the coming battle and the uncertain future beyond it. Somewhere in the back of his consciousness, a part of him noted the irony. He'd spent years avoiding entanglement in causes, keeping emotional distance from allies and enemies alike. Yet in less than 2 days, a woman who'd threatened to show him a monster he wouldn't survive had somehow made him care about a world and a people he'd never known existed before his crash. Perhaps, he thought, his exhaustion finally claimed him. That was a kind of monster, too, the kind that transformed rather than destroyed. Morning came too quickly, the twin suns of Viridia rising to illuminate the haven in golden light. The Viridians had spent the night in preparation, crafting weapons that channeled essence, strengthening their connections to Viridia's energy, saying farewells to those who would remain behind to protect the young. Kale awoke to find new equipment waiting for him. A staff-like weapon with essence crystals embedded along its length and lightweight armor woven from materials that shifted color to match surroundings. Both were clearly Viridian in design, but adapted for human use. Gifts from our crafters, Lyra explained when she arrived to escort him to the gathering point. She herself wore similar armor, though hers integrated more seamlessly with her luminescent skin. The staff will amplify your connection to the essence. My connection? Kale questioned, examining the weapon. All living things have some connection to the essence, Lyra explained. Even humans. Yours is dormant, untrained, but present. The staff will help you channel what little you can access. Kale wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea of wielding alien energy he barely understood, but he accepted the gifts with gratitude. The armor fit perfectly, lightweight, yet surprisingly resilient when he tested its strength. The strike force assembled at the edge of the haven, 20 Viridians of varying ages, all with pronounced luminescent patterns marking them as capable channelers. Soren would lead a secondary team to rescue the captive Viridians while Lyra's group, with Kale, targeted the extraction equipment. Remember, Kale addressed the assembled warriors, timing is crucial. The diversion must draw enough attention to allow both teams to reach their objectives. Once the extraction equipment is compromised, don't linger. The resulting energy surge will be unpredictable. Soren approached Kale as the others made final preparations. The elder's expression remained guarded, but some of the open hostility had faded. You know that if this fails, Lyra will likely attempt to confront Malachor directly, he said quietly. I've considered that possibility, Kale admitted. She's determined to free your people. Her determination is admirable but dangerous. As a high channeler, her emotional state affects her connection to the essence profoundly. If rage or fear overwhelms her, Soren's voice trailed off meaningfully. The monster she warned me about, Kale finished. I understand. Do you? Soren's amber eyes bored into Kale's. If Lyra loses control completely, the transformation may be irreversible. We would lose her, and possibly much more. The gravity of the elder's warning settled heavily on Kale's shoulders. I'll watch out for her, he promised. See that you do? Human, Soren replied. For all our sakes. The journey to the extraction site was tense and silent. They traveled through Viridia's most secretive paths, underground route networks, hidden ravines, and canopy routes that kept them concealed from patrols and drones. By the time the twin suns reached their zenith, they had positioned themselves at strategic points surrounding the collector facility. From their vantage point, Kale could see that the operation had expanded overnight. More drilling apparatuses had been deployed, additional silencers patrolled the perimeter, and the central facility had grown to accommodate new equipment being unloaded from the hovering mothership. They're accelerating the extraction, Lyra observed grimly. We're running out of time. Kale studied the patrol patterns, noting the increased security but also the signs of haste. Imperfect formations, overlapping sensor coverage that created blind spots, supply lines stretched thin. They're pushing too hard too fast, he noted. That creates vulnerabilities. As night approached and the twin suns began their alignment, the strike force made final preparations. The essence levels were already rising, visible as a subtle aurora in the sky above and a brightening of the Viridian skin patterns. Remember, Kale addressed his team one final time. I draw them to the eastern perimeter. Once the alarm sounds, you have perhaps 10 minutes to reach the central extraction node before they realize it's a diversion. Lyra gripped his arm, her touch conveying concern she wouldn't express in words before the others. The diversion position is dangerously exposed. That's the point, Kale replied with a wry smile. Can't be a proper distraction if it doesn't draw attention. The twin suns aligned at midnight, casting Viridia in an eerie, intensified light as the ambient essence surged. Plant life throughout the forest responded, flowers blooming, fungi expanding, trees swaying despite the absence of wind. The extraction equipment in the facility below ramped up to capture the energy spike, tubes glowing brilliantly as they transported essence to storage containers. Now, Soren whispered, and the teams separated, moving toward their designated positions. Kale approached the eastern perimeter alone, using the adaptive armor to blend with his surroundings. The silencers patrolled in teams of two, their movements precise but predictable. He waited for a gap in their coverage, then made his move. The essence staff felt warm in his hands, resonating with the energy saturating the air. Following Lyra's brief instructions, Kale focused his intent through the weapon, visualizing the result he wanted. To his surprise, the staff responded, not as powerfully as it would for a Viridian, but enough to send a focused blast of energy into one of the secondary extraction pumps. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The pump overloaded, rupturing in a cascade of light and sound that triggered alarms throughout the facility. Silencers converged on the breach exactly as planned. Kale triggered 2 more targeted explosions, creating the impression of a substantial attacking force. From his position, he could see Lyra's team using the distraction to approach the central facility from the opposite side. Soren's group had already infiltrated the prisoner compound, moving with the silent efficiency of experienced warriors. The plan was working until it wasn't. A blinding light erupted from the main facility, causing Kale to shield his eyes. When his vision cleared, he saw a figure hovering above the central platform. Malachur, the overseer, surrounded by swirling essence energy that seemed to bend and distort the air around him. Pathetic resistance. The entity's voice boomed across the clearing, unnaturally amplified. Did you think we wouldn't anticipate your desperate attack? With a gesture from Malachur, hidden defense systems activated throughout the perimeter. Energy barriers springing up to isolate sections of the facility, cutting off both Viridian teams from their objectives. Silencers that had rushed to Kale's diversion suddenly reversed course, moving with increased speed toward the real threats. Trap, Kale muttered, abandoning stealth for speed as he raced to warn Lyra's team. The Essence staff proved unexpectedly useful in clearing a path, not as a weapon, but as a tool for disrupting the energy barriers just enough to slip through. He reached Lyra's position as her team found themselves surrounded by silencers. The Viridians fought valiantly, channeling essence into powerful attacks that kept their enemies at bay, but they were clearly outnumbered. Malachur knew we were coming. Kale shouted to Lyra as he joined the fray, using the staff to amplify his combat skills rather than channel essence directly. He set this up. Lyra's expression hardened as she directed devastating arcs of energy at approaching silencers. We need to reach the central extraction node regardless. If we can't shut it down properly, we'll overload it. That could kill everyone here, Kale warned, including us and the prisoners. Better that than allowing Malachur to complete the great extraction, Lyra responded grimly. If he succeeds, all of Viridia dies anyway. The battle intensified as more silencers joined the assault. Kale and Lyra fought back-to-back, her essence abilities complementing his tactical expertise. Together, they created an opening in the enemy line, allowing them to advance toward the central platform where Malachur continued to direct the conflict. Across the facility, Soren's team had managed to free some of the prisoners, but now found themselves cut off from escape. The Elder channeled powerful essence attacks that kept the silencers at bay, but his energy was clearly waning. "Lyra," Kale called, pointing toward the prisoner's situation. "Soren needs support. I can reach the extraction controls while you help them." Lyra hesitated, torn between objectives. "You can't face Malachur alone." "I don't intend to face him at all," Kale replied. "Just sabotage the equipment and get out. Go help your people." After a moment's internal struggle, Lyra nodded. "Be careful," she urged before directing a massive surge of essence to clear a path towards Soren's position. Kale used the distraction to slip closer to the central platform, using his adaptive armor and the chaos of battle as cover. The extraction node was an imposing structure. Transparent tubes, thicker than his body, carried glowing essence from deep-bore holes into massive storage containers. The control systems were alien in design, but followed logical engineering principles he could interpret. As he reached the control panel, a shadow fell over him. "Human," Malachur's voice resonated from directly behind him. "How curious that you would betray your own kind for these primitives." Kale turned slowly to face the overseer. Up close, Malachur was even more unsettling, a being caught between states of existence. His form was vaguely humanoid, but fluid, the reflective surface where a face should be rippling like mercury. Beneath his robes, currents of essence flowed through a body that seemed more energy than matter. "The Viridians aren't the primitives here," Kale replied, buying time as he assessed his options. "Stealing another species' life force? That's about as primitive as it gets." Malachur made a sound that might have been laughter. "You misunderstand entirely. We don't steal, we elevate. The essence is wasted on this world and its simple guardians. The collectors will transform it into power that can reshape galaxies." "Starting with you?" Kale observed, nodding toward Malachur's semi-transformed state. "How's that working out? Keeping your humanity intact?" Humanity. Malachur dismissed the concept with a wave that left trails of light in the air. "A transitional state at best. The essence offers evolution beyond your comprehension." While maintaining the dialogue, Kale had been subtly positioning himself near a critical junction in the extraction system. If he could rupture it with the essence staff, the resulting cascade failure might accomplish their objective. "I think I comprehend just fine," Kale replied, tightening his grip on the staff. "You gave up your humanity for power. Pretty simple transaction. A transaction your Viridian allies offered you as well, I suspect," Malachur observed with unsettling insight. "They've already begun the process, haven't they? I can see the essence they've awakened within you, dormant in all humans but responsive to proper stimulation." Kale faltered momentarily, remembering the tingling sensation when he'd first entered the Haven, the way the essence staff had responded to his intentions. "I'm nothing like you," he insisted. "Not yet," Malachur agreed. "But the path begins the same. Tell me, did they explain what prolonged essence exposure does to human physiology? How it rewrites neural pathways, alters genetic expression? They've already changed you, whether you realize it or not." Before Kale could respond, a massive explosion rocked the facility as Soren's team detonated one of the secondary essence storage tanks. The distraction was exactly what Kale needed. He lunged forward, driving the essence staff into the junction point with all his strength. The staff penetrated the conduit, releasing a geyser of pure essence that immediately began to destabilize. Alarms blared as the extraction system's failsafes activated, unable to contain the cascading failure. Malachur roared with rage, his form flickering as he directed a blast of concentrated energy at Kale. The attack struck him squarely in the chest, sending him flying backward into a tangle of equipment. Pain lanced through his body, unlike anything he'd experienced before. Not just physical agony, but something deeper, as if the energy was interfering with his very essence. "Fool!" Malachur's voice distorted with fury. "You've destabilized the primary conduit. The resulting surge will destroy everything within a half-kilometer radius." Kale struggled to his feet, using the essence staff for support. That includes you, doesn't it? He managed through gritted teeth. I have evolved beyond such vulnerabilities, Malachar replied, though his flickering form suggested otherwise. But you and your Viridian allies will perish. The facility trembled as the extraction system approached critical failure, essence spilling from ruptured conduits and swirling in chaotic patterns throughout the structure. Silencers began to retreat, abandoning their posts as self-preservation protocols activated. Kale used the growing confusion to slip away from Malachar, heading toward Lyra's last position. He found her locked in combat with a group of elite silencers, her movements becoming increasingly frantic as she tried to reach the remaining prisoners. Soren had managed to free some, but others remained trapped behind energy barriers that even the essence surge hadn't disrupted. Lyra, Kale shouted over the cacophony of alarms and rumbling equipment. We need to evacuate. The whole place is going to blow. She turned toward his voice, her amber eyes wild with determination and something else, the dangerous edge of control slipping. The patterns beneath her skin pulsed erratically, brightening beyond their normal intensity. I won't leave them, she insisted, gesturing toward the captives. Not again. Not like my family. Kale recognized the dangerous path her emotions were taking. Soren's warning echoed in his mind. If rage or fear overwhelmed her, the transformation might be irreversible. We'll free them, he promised, reaching her side and grabbing her arm to ground her. But not by sacrificing yourself. Not by becoming what you fear. For a tense moment, Lyra's gaze remained distant, the essence flowing through her threatening to surge beyond control. Then her eyes focused on Kale, recognition returning. The barriers, she said, her voice steadier. They're tied to the main system. If the extraction equipment is failing, we might be able to override them, Kale finished, understanding. The emergency protocols should prioritize containment of the essence over prisoner security. Together, they fought their way to the central control terminal, Kale's tactical knowledge complementing Lyra's essence abilities as they dealt with the remaining silencers. The extraction node continued to deteriorate, brilliant flares of energy shooting from fractured conduits. The countdown to catastrophic failure was visible on every monitor, less than 5 minutes remaining. Here, Kale indicated a security subsystem. The barrier controls. Lyra placed her hands on the terminal, channeling essence directly into the system. The alien interface responded to her energy signature, displays flickering as she forced commands through the failing network. It's working, she announced as the energy barriers around the prisoner compound flickered and dissolved. Soren now, across the facility, the Elder Viridian led the freed captives toward the perimeter, his team providing cover against the few silencers still maintaining their posts. Malachar was nowhere to be seen, likely retreated to his personal vessel to escape the impending destruction. 2 minutes, Kale warned, reading the cascading failure warnings. We need to move. They ran for the exit, dodging falling debris as the facility began to tear itself apart. Outside, chaos reigned as silencers evacuated, smaller craft launching toward the mothership hovering above. The extraction equipment had begun to glow with dangerous intensity, the essence within pulsing like a heartbeat growing ever more erratic. They reached the forest's edge where Soren and the freed Viridians waited. The others? Lyra asked breathlessly. Safe, Soren confirmed, but we must get further away. When the node ruptures completely, a deafening boom interrupted him as the first storage tank exploded, sending a shockwave through the clearing. The group ran deeper into the forest, Kale bringing up the rear and urging stragglers forward. They had just reached a large rock formation when the main extraction node reached critical failure. The ensuing explosion transformed night into day, a hemisphere of pure essence energy expanding outward with devastating force. Trees, structures, and unfortunate silencers caught in the blast simply ceased to exist, converted to energy and absorbed into the growing sphere. Down! Soren shouted as the wave front approached their position. Kale threw himself to the ground beside Lyra, expecting obliteration. Instead, he felt a strange sensation, a rippling force that passed through rather than destroying. Opening his eyes, he saw the Viridians channeling in unison, creating a protective bubble of harmonized essence that allowed the destructive wave to flow around them. The explosion's aftereffects continued for what seemed like an eternity, but was likely only minutes. When the light finally faded, they emerged from behind the rock formation to survey the aftermath. Where the collector's facility had stood, only a perfectly circular crater remained, its edges glassy and smooth. The mothership had retreated to a higher altitude, clearly damaged but still operational. Smaller vessels continued to evacuate survivors from the disaster zone. "We did it," Lyra breathed, surveying the destruction with grim satisfaction. "The extraction is halted." "Temporarily," Soren cautioned. "Malachar escaped. The collectors will return with more forces, more equipment." "But we've bought time," Kale pointed out, "and proven they're not invincible." The freed prisoners approached, expressing gratitude to their rescuers. Many bore the marks of experimentation and prolonged captivity: dimmed skin patterns, haunted expressions, weakened frames. Yet even in their damaged state, they joined in channeling healing essence to those injured in the escape. "What of the human?" one of the elders asked Soren, gesturing toward Kale. "He has seen our sanctuary, knows our defenses." Before Soren could respond, Lyra stepped forward. "He risked his life for our people, faced Malachar himself to sabotage the extraction. He's earned our trust." The elders seemed unconvinced, but Soren raised a hand for silence. "Lyra speaks truth. The human Kale has proven himself an ally this day." He turned to Kale. "Though questions remain about your future among us." "Those can wait," Kale replied, wincing as the adrenaline faded and the pain of his injuries returned. "For now, we should return to the Haven before reinforcements arrive." The journey back was slow, hampered by the weakened condition of the freed captives. By the time they reached the sanctuary, the twin suns were rising again, bathing the valley in golden light that seemed to rejuvenate the weary warriors. The Haven's residents emerged to welcome the returning heroes and integrate the rescued Viridians into their community. Kale found himself the object of curious stares and cautious gratitude, the first human most of them had seen who wasn't a threat. Children were particularly fascinated, reaching out to touch his skin and hair with wonder at their lack of luminescent patterns. After ensuring the wounded were tended to, Kale sought solitude at the edge of the Haven. His body ached from the battle, particularly where Malachar's energy attack had struck him. More concerning were the strange sensations that lingered, a tingling awareness of the essence flowing through Viridia, an occasional glimpse of patterns beneath his own skin when he channeled through the staff. Malachar's words haunted him. "They've already changed you, whether you realize it or not." He didn't notice Lyra's approach until she settled beside him on the mossy bank, overlooking a small pool of luminescent essence. Her own injuries had been treated, though fatigue still showed in her posture. "The rescued channelers will recover," she said after a comfortable silence. "Some were held for months, their essence nearly drained, but our healers are skilled." "And the extraction site?" Kale asked. "The damage is extensive. It will take the collectors time to rebuild, especially with the mothership damaged." Lyra's gaze grew distant. "But Soren is right. They will return. This victory buys us time, not peace. Time to prepare. To plan a more permanent solution," Kale suggested. Lyra studied him with those penetrating amber eyes. "You speak as if you'll be part of that planning." Kale hadn't realized he'd made the decision until the words left his mouth. "I don't have many other options, do I? My ship is destroyed, my employers likely think I'm dead, and even if I could send a distress signal, it might lead more threats to Viridia." "Those are reasons to stay," Lyra observed, "but not necessarily good ones." "What would be a good reason, then?" Kale asked, meeting her gaze. A faint smile curved Lyra's lips. "Purpose, perhaps. Connection. Things I suspect you've lacked for some time." The insight struck uncomfortably close to home. Since Acarus, Kale had deliberately avoided both, floating from contract to contract, world to world, never staying long enough to form attachments or invest in causes. Yet here, in the span of days, he found himself doing exactly that. Perhaps, he admitted, though adjusting to life among your people won't be simple. I'm still an outsider. You are, Lyra agreed bluntly. But so am I in many ways. High channelers have always lived somewhat apart from others, feared for what we might become if control slips. The monster you warned me about when we met, Kale recalled. Lyra nodded, her expression solemn. During the battle, when I saw the captives, I felt it rising again, the rage, the power seeking release. I might have lost myself if not for your intervention. You'd have regained control, Kale assured her. Perhaps, she echoed his earlier response. But the risk will always remain. She hesitated, then continued more softly. Having someone who understands that balance, who can pull me back from the edge, that's valuable beyond measure. The implication hung between them, a mutual need, a complementary strength. Whatever connection had formed in their short time together, it ran deeper than convenience or circumstance. The elders are gathering to discuss our next steps, Lyra said, rising to her feet. Your input would be welcomed, especially regarding the collector's likely response to today's events. Kale followed her toward the central gathering area, aware of a subtle shift in how the Viridians regarded him now, still with caution, but tinged with acceptance. The rescued channelers, in particular, showed open gratitude, acknowledging his role in their liberation. As the council convened, Soren addressed the community, recounting the battle and honoring those who had participated. Today, we struck a significant blow against those who would drain Viridia of its lifeblood. But our struggle continues. The collectors will return, possibly with greater forces. Murmurs of concern spread through the gathered Viridians. One of the rescued channelers, a female with intricate patterns that marked her as experienced despite her apparent youth, spoke up. While captive, I overheard the silencers discussing their larger plan. The extraction site we destroyed was merely one of 3 planned locations. With all 3 operating simultaneously, they believed they could breach the central reservoir, the great essence where our ancestors sleep. This revelation caused immediate alarm. Soren raised his hands for calm. If this is true, we must locate and neutralize the other planned extraction points before they become operational. They'll be more heavily guarded now, Kale pointed out. Malachor won't underestimate us a second time. Then we must be stronger, another elder declared. Perhaps it is time to awaken more of our sleeping brethren. In dire times, the ancient ones have risen before. Soren looked troubled by this suggestion. The awakening ritual is dangerous and unpredictable. Those who sleep have done so for millennia. They may not be the allies we remember. What about other Viridian communities? Kale asked. Surely your people aren't limited to just this haven. There were others, Lyra confirmed, scattered across Viridia's continents. But communication has been difficult since the collectors arrived. Many may have already fallen. Then finding them should be our priority, Kale suggested. United, your people would stand a much better chance than isolated groups picked off one by one. The council debated strategies late into the day, weighing options, risks, and resources. Throughout the discussions, Kale found his military experience valued, his outsider perspective offering insights the Viridians might have overlooked. By the time the meeting concluded, a plan had formed. Teams would be dispatched to scout the potential extraction sites and attempt contact with other Viridian communities. Meanwhile, the Haven's defenses would be strengthened in preparation for potential retaliation. As the council dispersed, Soren approached Kale privately. You have proven your worth this day, human. But there is something you should know. The elder's expression grew solemn. The essence exposure you've experienced is changing you, as it does all who remain long on Viridia. Malachor said something similar, Kale admitted. Then my neural pathways, my genetics were being rewritten. Soren nodded. The collectors understand the process, though they pervert it with their technology. Normally, humans who settle on Viridia undergo a gradual adaptation over generations. Your accelerated exposure through the staff, the Haven's protections, and direct essence contact during battle has compressed that timeline. What does that mean for me? Kale asked, a flicker of concern surfacing. Increased sensitivity to essence energies, for a start. Enhanced healing. Perhaps other abilities in time. Soren studied him carefully. It is not necessarily harmful, but it is irreversible. The longer you remain, the more pronounced the changes will become. Kale absorbed this information, unsure how to feel about it. The concept should have terrified him, his humanity gradually altering into something else. Yet after what he'd seen of Iridia and its people, after witnessing the beauty and power of the essence, a part of him was curious rather than afraid. "I understand," he said finally. "Thank you for telling me." "You deserve to know," Soren replied, "especially as you consider your place among us." The elder hesitated, then added, "Lyra has requested that you join her scouting team. She values your tactical knowledge and your stabilizing presence. I have approved this assignment, if you are willing." Kale thought of Lyra, her strength and vulnerability, her power and her fear of that same power. He thought of the connection they'd formed through danger and trust, the way they'd balanced each other's weaknesses with complementary strengths. "I'm willing," he confirmed. Later that evening, as preparations began for the scouting missions, Kale found himself once more at the edge of the haven, watching his essence flow brightened with the setting of the twin suns. The staff the Viridians had gifted him stood propped against a tree nearby, its crystals glowing faintly in response to the ambient energy. Experimentally, he reached for it, focusing his intent as Lyra had taught him. The crystals brightened, responding to his call. A brief, impossible pattern shimmered beneath the skin of his forearm. There and gone in an instant, but unmistakable. "Impressive progress," Lyra's voice came from behind him. "Most humans require months to achieve that level of resonance." Kale turned to find her watching with an approving smile. "Soren told me about the changes. The accelerated adaptation. Does it frighten you?" she asked directly. Kale considered the question carefully. "It should," he admitted. "Becoming something other than human, that's not a small thing. But after what I've seen here, what I've experienced..." He looked at his hand, remembering the fleeting luminescence. Perhaps change isn't always loss. Lyra moved closer, her own patterns shifting with emotion. "When we first met, I threatened to show you a monster you wouldn't survive." She shook her head ruefully. "I never considered that you might instead help me survive my own monsters." "We all have them," Kale replied. "Different forms, different triggers, but the same essential danger, the loss of control of self. And yet, you've chosen to stay, to continue fighting alongside a people not your own, risking those same dangers." Kale smiled. "Maybe I'm tired of running from one meaningless contract to another. Or maybe," he added more seriously, "I've finally found a cause worth committing to, a world worth defending." "Just the world?" Lyra asked, her amber eyes holding his gaze with unexpected vulnerability. Kale reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if his touch was unwelcome. When she remained still, he gently traced one of the luminescent patterns on her arm. "No," he said softly, "not just the world." The pattern brightened at his touch, responding to the connection forming between them. Human and Viridian, both changing, both adapting, both finding in the other something long missing. As night fell completely over Viridia, the forest around the haven came alive with bioluminescence, plants, insects, and the very earth itself glowing with the essence that connected all living things. Within this natural symphony of light, two figures stood close together at the edge of the sanctuary, their silhouettes gradually blending as the distance between them closed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, collectors to oppose, extraction sites to neutralize, other Viridians to find and unite. But for tonight, in this moment of hard-won peace, Kale and Lyra found something neither had expected when their paths first crossed in that distant cave. Not survival merely, but the possibility of truly living. The monster Lyra had warned of still existed within her. The potential for destructive transformation when control slipped. And within Kale, changes continued as Viridia's essence reshaped, what it meant to be human on this alien world. But together, they balanced these dangers, each a counter to the other's darkness, each a guide when paths grew uncertain. "Touch me again, human," Lyra whispered, an echo of their first meeting transformed into invitation rather than threat. Her amber eyes held his, no longer hostile, but warm with affection and trust. The patterns beneath her skin brightened in response to his proximity, not with defensive energy, but with welcome. Kale smiled as he complied, no longer a stranger on an alien world, but a defender of Viridia, a companion to its guardian, and perhaps, in time, something new altogether, neither fully human nor Viridian, but a bridge between worlds. Whatever challenges awaited beyond this moment of connection, they would face them together, transformed by choice rather than fear. And in that choice lay the truest victory over the monsters they both carried within.